Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second webinar in the series for the course this fall. We will pause for a minute so that everybody who is holding their time on their calendars to be with us on this webinar can join in. Meanwhile, if you see any of your co-learners commenting in the discussion forum that they are not able to see the video or the screens are not streaming, please do put a comment back asking them to refresh their browsers. And finally, if you're watching us live, don't forget to take the survey that you see below the screen, which asks if you're watching us live, click yes, so that you can get your extra points. We will start in 30 seconds. Meanwhile, don't forget to drop your questions that you have either on the theme of the module for this week or for our guest speaker in the discussion forum. We'll try to see as many as we can take during the span of the session. Okay, let's get started then. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fall 2021 Social Entrepreneurship for Innovation in Health course. As you are aware, this course is part of Global Making More Health initiative. This initiative explores ways of improving access to healthcare for people, animal, and communities around the world. Through the course, participants connect with global cohort of health professionals from across private, public, and nonprofit sector. They all convene to learn about entrepreneurial strategies to create best social and business impact through their work in the health and wellness space. This is the second webinar in the series for the course. So our session is going to be focused on the theme of the module for the week, which is entrepreneurial challenges and opportunities. As I said, please drop your questions either regarding the theme of the course or something that you want to learn from our guest speaker in the discussion forum. Okay, without much ado, I'm very pleased to introduce Lizzie Kiama, who is our guest expert for the session and who will share with us her lessons and secrets of dealing with challenges and techniques to tap opportunity. Lizzie is the managing trustee of Disability and an Ashoka Fellow. Lizzie has been leading a very brave life with her disability as an identity. Welcome, Lizzie, and thank you very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Indrani. I'm very fine. I'm extremely honored to be part of this process. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lizzie. Lizzie, we have loads of questions to ask you. Our learners are also very excited and they also have so many questions. But the primary question that we want to get started with is to know about your experience about how you got started as a social entrepreneur. What has been your professional journey like, and what is the story behind founding Disability? So can you share a little briefly about that?
Sure. Thank you. My journey in founding Disability has been interesting, and it's part of my personal journey as a woman, as a disabled woman, and also, trying to be a professional in this sector. I was trying to find a job after I had my daughter in 2010, and I could not find a job despite me having a business degree. I could not find a job. I had previously worked in the banking sector for a number of years, and I took a break to go back to school and have a family. So when I was trying to get back into the market, it was difficult for me to find a job. And I had just started my journey around identifying as a disabled woman. So that was, another part of the process. And I realized that I wanted to learn a little more about the disability community, and also how disability organizations operated in Kenya. So because I could not find a job, I decided to volunteer with a government agency that focuses on disability rights in Kenya. And they were very quick to accept my offer to volunteer, which was beneficial for me. But when I was there, I worked there for about 6 months. When I was there, I realized there was a gap in how this specific government agency that focused on disability was engaging with private sector on issues to do with employment of persons with disabilities. Their main agenda at the time was to increase employment opportunities for persons with disabilities, but they had completely ignored, the private sector. So because I had a business background, I decided, let me start a company that focused on disability inclusion within the private sector. I started this in 2012, and I operated as a one-woman show for a number of years. But I also was very intentional about being a company. I did not want to work as a nonprofit because I still believe there's a lot of value in disability rights, and it makes business sense for organizations to incorporate disability. So I thought there was, it was a profit-making venture. So that's how I started. Years later, funders, donors, nonprofit donors approached me with the idea of investing in my work. But of course, with funding, donor funding, it can only be invested at the time. It could only be invested in nonprofit vehicles. So we gave in to their request and registered a nonprofit, and we became Disability Trust. I still run the company, but my main focus now is on the nonprofit activities. And we have grown. The funding has allowed us to grow, build a team, expand our work, and it's been exciting. Thanks.
Great. So you started as a social entrepreneur and you've grown as a social intrapreneurs. I'm mentioning this because most of our learners are intrapreneurs who are working in big organizations. So just wanted to mention that. So Lizzie, we want to learn both about the disability sector, which we know we can underscore that the connotations or certain ways of how disability sector works is lesser known. We believe that. And so we're going to have some questions around that and some questions around the entrepreneurial challenges and opportunities. So I'll take the first question, which is on the theme of the module for the week. And my next question to you is, can you share briefly what has been the biggest challenges that you have faced in your journey? And has the pandemic added to that or shown you new ways of working?
Yeah, thanks for those great questions. So my biggest challenge, of course, financial resourcing has always been a big issue. But I think for me, because I was a one-woman operation for a number of years, I needed to build a team. And building a team that was as motivated as I was to work on this issue, that was continuously investing in their own learning around the issue, because even if I identified as a disabled woman, I needed to immerse myself in a lot of material to understand, the disability rights movement and, educate myself basically. So I personally, took that initiative to invest in learning and unlearning some of the biases. So building a team with those expectations that, people will come on board to work with me because they're as motivated and they're as passionate, they're as curious about the issue, was a big ask. I think it was a big ask. And I have witnessed that over the years, because when we did not have enough funding to pay people adequately, and even when we were able to pay people adequately, it was a measure of whether someone stays or not, or how invested they were in the process. So for me, I think resourcing, human resources was a big, big challenge. Thankfully, I have now a solid team. I hope I have a solid team. But I have people that have been with me for at least 3 years, which I take as a blessing. But I think those expectations that I had, that, for me, this is an issue that I can work on for free, So I translate some of those expectations to my team members, and sometimes it's not fair. But also, I feel like there are some issues that you cannot take away from the person. And issues around disability rights, it's not something that you leave when you walk out of the office, for example.
Absolutely.
So that was also something that I needed, the people that I'm working with to understand that our work was about influencing the general society on what we're looking to change. So that change cannot just happen in the office. You need to walk with that change, in all your personal spaces. So sometimes it's a big ask for team members who can be detached. So that has been my biggest challenge.
Great. So human resource or talent management, or so that has been the biggest challenge. I like the thing that you were saying about learning and unlearning. I wanted to quickly ask you, learning and unlearning is a challenge or is it an opportunity?
It's an opportunity, but it also, it's a challenge because when you're asking people you're wanting to disrupt how people have continuously looked at an issue or interacted with a particular topic, and you're telling them to forget everything that they have valued or they have held as the truth. You're telling them that is not the truth, and you need to disrupt that and get them thinking in a different direction. It is a challenge because it's a lot of investment to ensure that people are thinking critically around the issue and are analyzing their thoughts and their interactions, and are setting up the structures that support that type of thinking. But at the same time, it's an opportunity because once you make the shift, then it's all systems go. So.
Got it. Also, Lizzie, my next question to you is about the greatest learning that has come your way as a social entrepreneur, because while you are an entrepreneur, but there are certain lessons that are quite generic and can be easily adapted by the social entrepreneurs. So as I said, our course is primarily for social entrepreneurs. So do you think that there are some lessons that is generic that you have experienced and can be easily adapted by an entrepreneur that you want to share?
Lessons that can be adapted by an entrepreneur. I truly, I think entrepreneurs, for me, try to address, the root causes of problems in society. Even if you're operating as part of an organization, it's still targeted towards addressing a problem within the community. So the same type of creative thinking, the same type of curiosity that enables you to, or encourages you to go deeper on the issue to address the root cause of a problem. I think that serves both entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. I think for entrepreneurs, it might not have maybe the flexibility to change things as quicker. And because for me, if there's a problem and my team brings it to me, or I see a problem, then it's relatively fast for me to make changes. And I think there are more processes, if you're working as part of an organization. But I think it benefits both to ensure that you're questioning whether we are actually adding value to this issue or we're taking away. I think it's beneficial to always maintain proximity to the community, because they're the ones that are living with the issue that you want to address. And I believe that each department of an organization, regardless of how detached finance and media might be, they are all part of one ecosystem. And if one component was removed from the equation, then the entire system would not work. So everything builds on each other. So I think there is a role that we all can play when it comes to addressing issues and, in one's journey as a social entrepreneur.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. I thought that I'm going to take the live questions of audiences in a bit, but there's a very compelling question that has come from one of our live audience members, Sophia Manduvama. And just because you were mentioning about creativity and curiosity, that's exactly something that she has asked. But it's a two-part question. So Sophia is asking, how best can one make innovative idea become a reality in an institution which is too rigid to think out of the box? And her second question is how to navigate in a corporate culture who do not value creativity and curiosity.
I hear that question. And I struggle with that. And I think I will fall back on my experience, because the funding environment is also very similar to, leadership processes when you're looking to change things. When I registered my company, I knew I wanted to do different. I knew I did not want to replicate the same types of projects that, had continuously been around. But I was not able to convince any funder to jump on board, because of course, everyone is risk averse. No one wants to invest in this thing that has not been proven. So for me, working as a consultant helped me, mobilize resources that I was then able to channel into very small, pilot projects that could prove, would be proof of concept, right? And once we had that, proof of concept, we now realize that donors were a little more interested in having conversations, because we could prove that this can be done and this was the impact. And I know with companies, I'm trying to remember when I was working at the bank many years ago, we had little pools of resources to initiate projects in the community. Maybe that's one area where you can come together with like-minded team members and initiate, your creative thought processes that you have had. Of course, you have to make the justification, but most of the time, this types of, funds that companies provide, you have some flexibility as a team. And once you have proven that concept, most likely, you will get additional investments. So I hope that helps.
Yes, I'm sure it does. Yes, I understand that, financial resources are the ones which decide a lot of things. So I am 100% sure that what you're saying is, yes, proof of concept does make a lot of difference. I'm going to go back to a fundamental question that this week's module also addresses, which is about the root cause of a social problem. If we look at the right way of identifying the root cause of a social problem, we also look at the best way of offering a solution. So what, from your experience, Lizzie, what is your recommendation for our learners to identify the root cause of a social problem?
For me, what I have prioritized and what our organization culture is to ensure that our relationships with the community that we work for is of utmost importance. That is something that we don't take lightly, because we believe that is where we find the solutions. We can add value to solutions that are proposed by the community, but if there is no ownership within the community, then it makes no sense, the solutions that we provide. So we have to ensure that our relationships are respectful and that we are treating them as partners, not so we don't refer to our project participants as beneficiaries. They're not benefiting. It's a two-way process. We are benefiting and our funder is also benefiting. So it's part of a larger system. So for me, identifying a root cause of a problem has to go in tandem with the types of relationships we build and we sustain with the communities we work for. If there's no partnership, if there are no relationships, then I can guarantee that, you will not get the solutions, or the solutions will be so high level that there will be no ownership within the community. And there needs to be a connection. So it's very important that we maintain proximity to the communities we work for, that we enhance those relationships. And if there is need to add value to the processes, then that is what our role is, but not to propose things that the community does not have buy-in.
Yes, in fact, this has been a great conversation, even amongst the learners when they had gone through some of the resources that this week's module offered, especially around how important it is to identify the root cause. You mentioned something very important, which is about partners and treating everybody, all stakeholders, whether they are the communities or people who work with you, as partners. So because you mentioned partners, I had another question around partnerships, so I'm going to pull that up and ask you, what are the best practices that you have followed in building impactful partnerships, and what is your recommendations of certain things that has really worked in building good collaborations?
Partnerships are tricky. Yes, we have always, wanted partners, and, because this work, you cannot exist in a silo. But we've found there are also dynamics to certain relationships that we need to be conscious of. And so for me, and I hope it resonates with the people that are listening, but for me, we have focused on ensuring that we are as equipped as a unit at Disability, that we are equipped to say no, for example, to wrong partners, to say yes to the right partners. But in order to even get to a place that you can say no, because sometimes, a partner will come on board to offer financial support, and it's financial support that you need desperately, but they might change the internal workings or mechanisms of your organization, or disrupt the culture. That is not beneficial in the long run. Yes. So for us, we have tried to maintain a lean structure that allows us to be flexible, that, allows us to build, to resource internally, and then, we can expand. So we are able to then, pick and choose who is a good fit. Because I think partnerships is tricky, because sometimes we get into partnerships because, we think we are on the receiving end. And for me, it's super important to be clear that it's a two-way process. And regardless of the fact that we might be a small entity, there's there's a reason why we're partnering, and that there are learnings on both sides. So value addition on both ends is critical. And if it's not clear, your value addition to a process, then I would back out, because power dynamics and politics and all these will start, coming out. Yeah. So
just because you mentioned that, though this question I didn't plan to ask you, but I'm going to ask you, how do you exit such a partnership, which is so tricky? If you don't like a partnership, how do you exit that?
We have exited a partnership that was super, super beneficial. It was with one of the leading women's rights organizations. And we exited because they wanted to change us, and make us a mini version of themselves. And it's important to realize your own identity, and that your identity exists to serve a purpose. And if you want to change, to conform to standards that are not intrinsic to who you are, it defeats the purpose. Then what's the point of you existing as an organization? So we respectfully bowed out of the partnership. And then interestingly, the donor who was funding them for that particular partnership decided to fund us independently, directly.
Great story. Yeah, sometimes this happens. You've been talking a lot about disability rights, and how there is a lot of work or scope of lot of work to do in that sector. I'm going to turn to a very sector specific question. Disability sector needs enhanced momentum globally to contribute to achieve the global goals of inclusion. What trends do you see currently worldwide towards achieving this aim, and what are the emerging opportunities for organizations such as yours?
Well, for me, the disability sector, almost, every concept that comes out of the disability sector talks about stigma and discrimination that people with disabilities experience. And that is true. That happens the world over. And in Kenya, for example, it is true that cultural misconceptions around disability play a major role in how, the general society interacts or has experienced disability. I think it's important to figure out ways or to piggyback on trends that are helping communities unlearn some of the biases that, we have traditionally interacted with. And I think media is a powerful platform to begin changing those narratives. It's important to, media has the capacity to change public awareness, to, shift problematic narratives. But media is still not on board fully, at least in Kenya. It's not fully on board, the disability rights agenda. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen, a lot of investments, a lot of education. It would be great if, the academic sector, for example, took up disability rights as, a critical module for, all university students. It would be great, even from a very early age, that, we're exposing children to disabilities so that we can begin to unlearn and we can begin to dispel, the myths and the cultural biases. So I have seen globally, some trends that are picking up with, trying to change the image of disability, because traditionally it was, a charity-based image or victim narrative. And it would be great if countries like Kenya, and disability has started, we document imagery, photography, videos of women with disabilities, and exploring their individuality, not because they're disabled, not focusing on the disability, but because they're women first. And that's the narrative that needs to be prevalent.
Yes, I agree with that. I'm going to turn to take some audience questions. There are lots of them coming in, so let me just kind of turn to them. And though you spoke about something very interesting just now, just to focus and recap on that, is the unlearning journey, or the academic focus and media can certainly contribute to giving more impetus to disability right. Completely agree on that. Sarah McClelland is asking, what would, sorry, I think McClelland, sorry for pronouncing you wrongly, Sarah. Sarah asks, what would you like to tell your younger self? Are there key things you wish you knew when you started?
Yeah, I think that it will all work out. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know, my work would grow. As I said, I started, by myself, and I have been working on the issue as an individual for a long time. So I never imagined that I would have, a team behind me, and, we would have this much momentum. So I think I experienced a lot of burnout for the same reason, trying to do everything. So I think I would tell myself to maybe slow down and enjoy life as well, because it will all work out in the end.
Yes.
And thank you for that reminder. I will tell myself that. Thank you.
Slow down and try not to do everything by yourself. Yes. Good learning. I'll also like to take another question from one of our learners. Name is Kwan Niem, I hope I'm pronouncing you correctly. Otherwise, I'm really sorry. And Niem asks, how did you manage to inspire your team around the same cause, focus on same mission? Can you tell about the tips of how you motivate and encourage people?
I don't know how, well, that is my biggest weakness, I think. I am not a nurturer. I am not, and I don't know if this is the right thing to say in this course, but this is not my strength at all. I expect people to take personal responsibility in their motivation. I cannot be the source of their motivation at all, because I am human. I fail. I feel extremely weak at times. I am not confident half of the time. I am, this is a good day. But yeah, this package is not, my day to day. So I think it's a big ask if my team looks at me as their source of motivation. And that's one thing I have tried to help them see, that yes, I understand that they look at me as this disabled woman who has created this thing and is successful, but I also still see myself as someone who is just working on a day-to-day basis. I don't see myself in their eyes, so I try and emphasize that, we all need to find our own motivation. We all need to come present and curious and figure out how to get there, because this is what, no one did this for me. I had to figure it out. I had to go into myself and build myself from the ground up. When I was starting the company, I had reached rock bottom. I was a new mother. I was disabled. I did not have a job. Life wasn't pleasant. And just because I started a company doesn't mean opportunities started coming. It took a long time. So I had to go internally, and I had to build myself, my motivation, my passion, my creativity, I could not get that externally. So I think I would have the same message for anyone. You have to go inside yourself and you have to build that. And sometimes, you're in an environment that's not a good fit, and you realize when you go into yourself that, there's other things that you're more interested in. And
Absolutely.
that's okay.
Yes, I must say that our audience really appreciate your transparency and ingenuity in kind of saying things that yes, certain things you are not good at, so great. And I completely agree with you, Lizzie, that, sometimes you can emerge as an inspiration just because the way you have approached a mission. And you probably do not need to go and motivate people. But one thing I want to ask as a follow-up question: you don't need to motivate people, but you need to choose your people, your companions in your journey. How do you do that?
So it's the same things. I normally get a good sense of people. I think I have that I don't know if it's because I'm disabled. I actually think it's because I'm disabled, because for some reason people don't feel they have to put up an act, or even if they're putting up an act, it doesn't stay on for very long. They cannot sustain it. So I'm able to read people fairly well, and because interacting with disability is an unconscious thing that you do. You don't even realize that you're treating me different because of my disability. And so I have learned to interact with people and realize this relationship we cannot sustain, because their approach to disability is going to be a problem. This one, is really trying to be respectful and is conscious about the little things. And for me, being conscious and being aware is extremely important. So because it speaks a lot, even with how they approach life and approach, issues. Because when you're mindful, I think that is when, even when it comes to problem solving and, creativity, you're able to pick up on opportunities because you're aware. So someone who just goes through life just because, that, so those are some of the things that's, I read people and we end up being a good fit or not.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just because you're talking about disability inclusion, we have one more question from our audience, Agnes Vidal and Christian Gomez, and they ask, you believe that there is a clear benefit in turning disability inclusion in private sector into a profitable business-oriented activity. Can you tell us more about how disability works with companies to change this narrative?
Right. Yes, I completely agree, or I completely believe that there is value, profit-making value in disability inclusion within private sector. I think because the disability community has been ignored for a very long time, there exists a gap in service provision, there exists a gap in, policies and programming. And I think that is a gap that companies can bridge. When it comes to the health sector, for example, people with disabilities, depending on your impairment, may have different needs. For example, packaging on medicines, pharmaceuticals, it would be great. And this has been the feedback, and it's slowly picking, getting traction. That for blind people, it would be great if the packaging included Braille, for example. It would be great for even menstrual products for women, involved women with disabilities to innovate, products that would specifically serve that demographic. But then, because this demographic is not exempt from mainstream society, you find that there are the products that are designed for specifically women with disabilities can be used by other women. So it's not designing for the disability market does not necessarily take away from the mainstream market. So there are very many opportunities because market research has not necessarily involved the disability community. There's a big gap there when it comes to innovation. And when we look at the older community, as people grow older, they are likely to acquire a disability. When businesses start interacting with the disability community to understand their needs when it comes to service products and services, then they also begin to plan for older persons. And when we look at it from an economic standpoint, the older generation does have, economic power, because these are people that are retired and are looking to spend their money. But if they cannot access, spaces, because these spaces did not think about disability inclusion, there are no ramps, there are no lifts, then people would rather stay at home and keep their money in the bank. We're not thinking about there's a lot, the social life of older people. It's the same type of products that you would design for people with disabilities. So we have to start thinking ahead, but we have to start thinking with the community together. So I hope that answers that.
Sure, it does. And just because you're talking about the disability inclusion, I would certainly want to ask you, what are your insights about the future of the disability sector? What does it look like globally and in your country, in Kenya?
So for me, an ideal situation is that the disability sector does not exist, because the goal is inclusion in society, so that for me, that would be the ideal, that everyone is thinking about, disability as part of our, our diversity as a society. But realistically speaking, there are a lot of laws that, are coming into place that support the rights of people with disabilities. It would be great if, implementation of these laws was taken a little more seriously, and that, the laws accompanied budget allocations, because a law is great on paper, but if there's no budget that supports implementation, then there's very little that can be done. So for me, more investments in the disability sector, but also the disability community also getting to a place where they feel confident that they can demand more, that they can demand better, I think is also needs to work hand in hand with those investments.
You mean to say like demand equal pay and demand kind of better work safety or things like that? Okay,
yes,
great.
Yes.
So, and do you see that there are what are the biggest barriers in like disability inclusion as of now? Is it just the lack of understanding or around rights, or like what are the barriers of this inclusion?
The majority of persons with disabilities in Kenya, one, live below the poverty line, two, are based in rural areas. And because of the levels of investment in disability education or awareness, the same cultural biases keep, getting perpetuated. It's a vicious cycle that keeps happening. So one, you're living in poverty, and two, you're in rural areas where, myths and cultural biases are prevalent. Chances are that you will not have access to education, which will, of course, impact your employment and, impact any positive outcomes in your life. So I've lost my train of thought. What was your question?
I basically I asked you, like, in terms of disability inclusion, what are the barriers?
So those are the, so yeah, so you have no access to education, employment outcomes are slim to none. And then when you look at, how the government operates, very little policies, for example, speak to the rights of persons with disabilities, unless it's a specific law that governs disability. But then the same, because we're not investing in education on disability rights, the same biases exist within the leadership, in organizations, in government. So it's like a wash, rinse, repeat, recycle. Like that's all we're doing. Nothing is changing. Right? So unless there is major pushback from the community, and it's sad that this becomes the responsibility of the disability community, but I feel like even when there is pushback, that it's not taken seriously. So we need to ensure that people with disabilities are economically empowered, because unfortunately, in our society, cash is king. You don't have money, you don't have a voice.
Yes.
You don't have money. So it's really sad. So when we're continuously ensuring that people with disabilities don't have access to school, cannot access employment opportunities, then we ensure that they stay at that level. And we need to change that. That needs to change.
Completely agree. Lizzie, unfortunately, we are moving towards the end of the session, so I'm going to pick up some of the common questions that I have. I'm sure it's going to resonate with a lot of learners. But yeah, one, just because, we are looking at this week's theme of the module, which is entrepreneurial challenges and opportunities, one of the important lessons that we derive in our lives is from failures. They are the biggest lesson givers. So do you have any cases of failures where you have learned your biggest lessons either directly or indirectly?
So when I talked about the partnership situation and we had to, retract from the partnership, I considered that a failure. I thought maybe I should have sucked it in. Maybe I should have, figured out other ways. I wasn't too sure because I have a team that, also relies on me. But then it worked out, and we were able to get direct funding. So so there's that. But then there's also the fact that from the time I incorporated the company to the time we became a trust to now, we have continuously, I feel like we've always been making mistakes, but we don't consider them mistakes. We consider them learning opportunities. If I had to ensure that we have a perfect environment, if I was risk averse, then I don't believe we would be here. So I think failures is an important part of the process. My motto, my mantra is just do it. Like if you have something that you're thinking about doing, just start. The important thing is to start. You learn on the way. Mistakes are part of the process. So I think that's an important thing that is part of how our culture, although as much as we are open to making mistakes, we minimize the risk. So we're always starting small and building as we go. So that has always helped us even reduce the level of failure.
Great. I recently learned something what is called Cantor's law, and it says every success looks like a failure in the middle. Do you believe that?
Yes, I think so. I don't think you can have success without failure.
Yes. So I think thank you for being so candid in sharing what you said. As mistakes are a learning process, and getting started is the biggest step that one needs to take, and then what happens in the journey is just kind of a course of the journey. Okay, Lizzie, I do have a few questions, but just in interest of time, what I will say is that I really have one concluding and a very important question, and I will want you to kind of answer it probably in a depth, because we want to learn from you. What is your motivation to keep going, and what is your advice to our learners to keep in kind of leading their entrepreneurial journeys? What are the things that they should bear in mind? Your motivation to keep going.
Right. When after I had left the banking sector, and I became a mother, and I was trying to figure out what I want to do, I was also navigating life as a disabled woman, and this was not something that I was very comfortable doing. There's a lot of negativity. We've discussed this. There's a lot of negativity around disability. So it wasn't an identity that I was fully ready to take on. But my partner encouraged me to do it. And so for me, the only way I could fully embrace the identity was to learn about the disability rights movement. So I researched, I enrolled in classes, courses, whatever, to learn as much as I could about the disability rights movement. And when I came out of that process, this was an identity that I could embrace with pride. And that is what triggered me to start a company that focused on disability, because it was my identity. It was not something anyone could take away from me. No one could come and tell me I was not being authentic, because this was my life. And everything that we have done, all my work has been a reflection of me. I see myself in the women we work with. Their story is my story. My story is their story. And if I could get myself, of course I had tons of, support mechanisms around me. But if I was able to make something of myself, then they can too. And that has been the driving factor. One, that I can identify with the problem, that this issue that I'm working on is my life. No one can take that away from me. And so I think it's important to find things that you can identify with. It does not have to be part of your identity, but it has to be something that you can relate with for whatever reason, that it is not so detached from who you are or what you believe in. I think that is why I wake up, to do this on a day-to-day basis, because it's me and I am these women are me. This is my purpose. What else is there to do? I could go find, a better paying job somewhere else, but the satisfaction is not the same. Not for me, at least. So for me, I think that would be my advice to anyone wanting to work on a social issue. Find a way to resonate with the problem.
Great insight, very candid. And I must say, Lizzie, your journey was incredibly inspiring. Your experience was so insightful and you were so candid in sharing all your experiences. It completely, it's like reflection of, yes, this is so true. It happens with us. So congratulations on being a remarkable change maker, and we wish you all the best for your future journey. Any last advice you have for your learners? Any last words you want to say to all those who are watching us?
One, I think it's unfair that people are watching me and I cannot see them. But yes, sending you warm sunshine from Nairobi. And I wish you all the best with your journey. And I don't think there's anything that is impossible. It might be my ego speaking, but I truly don't think anything is impossible. I think, you make a plan, you have the desire to make a change, make a plan, and progressively you see change. And you see change in the everyday. You see success in the everyday. Yes, you might see failures, but then it's important to also celebrate those daily and have gratitude in the daily successes, because they will get you to your final destination. So just make a plan and just do it. Just start where you are, wherever you are, start.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Lizzie. Thanks a lot for this advice. Very true. Get started. And just to sum up briefly on the moral of today's session, I'd like to just capture this. Entrepreneurial challenges can also bring opportunities if there is a clear sense of mission, and Lizzie demonstrates exactly that. Also, improvising solutions can help entrepreneurs persevere in uncertain times despite challenges. And Lizzie had given enough examples to kind of back this statement. And small entrepreneurial steps can change the whole conversation to improve the society. In module 1, you have seen Miriam Sidby, who is actually an entrepreneur in Unilever, had started this hand wash program, and it is so relevant in the time of pandemics today. So just to remind all of you, today is 15th of October. It's a global hand washing day, and that is why we said taking a small step can make so much of difference. And you would have already spotted that in Miriam Sidby's video that today is Global Hand Washing Day. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the course. Keep sharing your views and insights in the discussion forum. And next week's webinar is scheduled for 20th October at 11 a.m. EST, and you will meet another incredible guest speaker, Patrice Kinsley. Thank you everyone for joining once again. Stay safe and see you soon.